That sounds good to everybody. I would like to welcome Adam Hale. Adam is the CEO of Fairsail, who took it from 13 people to 200 plus, raised its ARR from 700,000 sterling to 14 million in just 4 years, which then it was acquired by Sage for 115 million. After that, Adam went plural and allowed for more variety and flexibility that enabled him to be a board member, an advisor, and an angel investor for several B2B SaaS firms, including Unit 4, which was acquired for $2 billion in 2021. So today, Adam is here to share with us 5-element framework success, how to be a market leader and how to be a successful business in 2023. So as much as I know you all love my welcomes and my introductions and me talking, I know you're not here to listen to me, but you're here for Adam. So without further ado, Adam.
Thank you very much, Jodie. And honestly, it's always a privilege to be with founders and CEOs of B2B SaaS. I spent my whole life in B2B SaaS, and I know you've got some fantastic companies, but also a privilege to be working with SaaStock. I've been lucky enough to be at the Dublin event in person, and so it's great to do this online. Just to give you a bit of a context on me, I learnt code 42 years ago, so quite a long time. I did a computer science degree in the mid-80s, and actually a measure of how the world has changed is when I told people what I was studying back then, they always said the same thing, which was, "Oh, I am sorry." And they asked me what I applied for, hoping I was going to say something honorable like physics or engineering or something. And I said, well, I applied for computer science. And they would say, oh, that's even worse. And so, I feel like being in software, I've gone from being an object of pity in the 1980s to we all are at the center of the world. And that's actually, I think, an incredible thing to do. As Jodie said, I spent 30 years in my exec career in 3 companies, 10 years in Accenture doing large-scale system integration and client delivery projects over the world. I was then a headhunter, so I built and led the software practice for Russell Reynolds, working with about 200 different software companies globally, building their very senior leadership teams and their boards. And that was fascinating because I got to see and really understand how all the software companies became successful. And I was then CEO of Fairsail, which was a cloud HR software firm. I ran it from 13 people to 150. And we did basically a kind of 20x expansion over 4 years, and then had an offer from Sage in 2017 that we couldn't refuse. If you're more interested in that journey, I've done something called the Lobster Tales, which is on LinkedIn. By the way, or ping me a LinkedIn invitation. I'd be delighted to accept. And I've got quite a bunch of things on there. That's what I tend to use. I wrote the thing called the Lobster Tales, which is a kind of scale-up, very extended blog of the whole scale-up journey at Fairsail. Since then, I've gone plural, as it's known. And so I'm privileged to work with all of these primarily B2B SaaS firms. I'm chairman of the top 3. I'm at Orbis today, just came out of a board meeting here. The business is doing fantastically well. And I have various different other roles of board member, investor, advisor, et cetera. And so I just love the kind of insight and the understanding with working with so many different businesses across Europe and the world and what they're doing. So I count myself enormously privileged to be in that situation. At the bottom, the fortunate things about my life is it leaves me quite a lot of time to spend cycling. So when I'm not with B2B SaaS, I'm on Strava/Zwift for those of you who like cycling. So just to kind of put in context where we are, in the UK, we may or may not be in a recession, but we're certainly not in a growth environment. And these are just cycles that will repeat over. And we're coming out of this incredible period. And I think what happens every time we go into a situation like this is that organizations need to behave differently. And in my view, and I just did a video series on this, fundamentally, businesses, including SaaS businesses, they need to talk to their customers more, and they need to push the quality up of everything they do, because nothing is forgiven in a low growth recessionary environment. And this is all in the context of, the last few years where growth has been pretty straightforward. What the picture means, by the way, is a phrase I heard a long time ago, which is that in a tornado, even turkeys can fly. And I'm sure that phrase exists in Finnish and German and French and all kinds of other things. But the whole point is, we've been in this environment where it's been the kind of everything boom. Money's been super cheap. Organizations have not bluntly had to be that productive. And organizations need to be incredibly productive now. And that goes across the board, and that means they need to be driving that productivity, that efficiency, that focus, that clarity of everything that they do. And certainly something that I see in every one of my board meetings now. Put your hands up if you discuss the rule of 40 in your business. Anyone? Those of you without hands up, I suspect you'll have your hands up within the next few months. So the rule of 40 is a thing in software, where essentially, and what it really does is it forces the discipline of productivity and efficiency on companies, because it says that the aggregate of your growth percentage and your profit percentage must be at least 40, i.e. you can be growing at 40% and break even, giving you 40, that's okay. You can be growing at 20% and without a profit percentage of 20, that adds at 40, that's okay. What you can't be doing is growing at 30% and being loss-making, that's not okay. You can't actually be growing at 40% to be loss-making. That's not okay. And it's interesting. So at Orbis here, we're actually planning. We want to get to rule of 50 and then rule of 60 over time, and then drive that additional productivity and effectiveness into the business. And those days that weren't that long past in terms of, well, you can just run profitable, loss-making, heavily loss-making for a while, and it'd be a kind of rule of minus 70. Generally speaking, in SaaS, those days are over now. And every organization I know is being pushed to get to rule of 40 pretty quickly. And that has all kinds of implications to it. Across the business, and this is a framework that that I use actually in every organization, and it's something that I developed when I was running Fairsail, and I use it now in all of the kind of board roles and other roles that I use, and it's really about the path to market leadership, and how the business can go to being the market leader, and ideally the dominant market leader in what it does. And there are 5 things in this framework that the organization needs to do well in order to become a market leader. But what's really difficult about this, which is the Betty quote on the bottom right, is that you need to do all of them at the same time. You can't say, well, in 2023, we're just going to work on innovation, and next year we're going to work on focus. You need to do them all at the same time. And so what I'm going to do, and again, love your insights and love your feedback, is actually talk through all 5 of these things and what they mean. And they're deliberately chosen to cut across organizational boundaries. What I'm not keen on is people, well, to be a market leader, you need to scale up sales, right? It's way more complicated than that. Because if you sell new customers and then you don't have customer success, honestly, what was the point? Or if you deliver customer success, but all your people are leaving, what's the point, right? You need to do all of these things in order to become a genuine market leader. But doing them at the same time is really, really, really tricky. Before I dive into to this kind of 5-element framework and those 5 things, any observations or questions at this point? No, yes. Is your hair really grey? Are you sure? What are you talking about? Who is this man? Why did I dial in? Anything.
I like it. I think it's spot on.
So far? Thank you, Simon.
To hear more. Yeah.
All right, great, fine. Thank you, Simon. Appreciate that. The transfer is on the way. Right, so what's the first one? The first one is purpose. And this is actually driven. So when I was a CEO, you go home, you have conversations with your family. My daughter, who's 25 now, she was 17 at the time. And she asked the kind of question that a 17-year-old girl can ask. She said, Dad, what's Fairsail for? And it's one of those questions where I thought, do you know what? All of the answers I was going to give you have got numbers in them, and you're not interested. So I thought, do you know what? That's actually a really good question that I don't have a very good answer for. And so that, to me, fundamentally is the purpose conversation. By the way, when I say purpose, I'm not talking about kind of ESG, and I do think that's incredibly important. But when I talk about purpose, I'm talking about, fundamentally what you do for your customers and how you can encapsulate that incredibly simply. So Clue is a B2B SaaS company based down in Bristol in the west of England that I'm chairman of, and with their permission, I'm using their purpose slide. And it's a framework that's tried and tested. I actually first saw this framework at Accenture. I know that McKinsey use it, Salesforce use it, many, many, many companies. Like everything good in life, it's borrowed and repurposed. And what it does, on the left-hand side, is it really sets out why your customers need you. So what is the problem that they have? What are the challenges? What is the pain that they're in? Because in my experience, customers always ask the same three questions in the same order every time. Why, what, how? So why do I need to do something different to what I'm doing? Because if you don't need to, you won't do anything. What can we achieve together? So what's the promised land? What's the art of the possible? How do we do it? And the mistake that many tech companies make is they're answering the how question. Let me tell you about our features when the customer's still asking why. So this is the emotional journey that every organization goes through. And it's one page, but as you all know, it takes a lot to kind of boil things down to one page and to have a kind of consistent framework that works for customers. But it's super, super powerful. I've helped a bunch of companies do this. I hugely recommend it as a framework. And what this does, the encapsulation of the why, is it allows you as a B2B SaaS firm to really get under the skin of what's ailing the customer and really why they need to do something different. And fundamentally, my belief in this is that we all need to think like doctors. So we've had doctors for a lot, we've had medicine for a lot longer than we've had software. Doctors are smart. When they talk to a patient, what they're fundamentally doing is they're looking for the pain. They're looking for the thing that's kind of, press it till it hurts. And then they will work with the patient to try and solve that. And so we need to really look for the pain. So I've just done a video series, again, that's out on LinkedIn, like 2 to 4 minute videos you're all welcome to look at. And one of them is really looking at the art of discovery calls. One thing as I get all my companies to do is to actually video discovery calls, and then I'll sit and kind of watch them back. And I was watching one the other day, and the customer said, and we really find that we're just having huge risks in this process. And the response to that was kind of, oh, okay, and then moved on to the next question. To me, it's like the warning bells are going, like, did you say huge risks? What do you mean by huge risks? And how do you react to those? And what do they mean in the business? And how do you mitigate them? And how would you like to address them? And what you're doing is you're looking for the pain, and you really want to understand what is the burning platform on which they need to do something different. And this is a framework that helps you do that, and all of your teams that do that. So again, it's not as if the founder and the CEO can't do that. The question is, can you get 15, 50, 100, 200 people doing the same thing when you're not on the call? How do you do that? So that's the first thing. It's really the kind of the purpose is that kind of, and I'll go back, fundamentally, what are you for in terms of understanding the why? And then also, so the left-hand side is by definition kind of a bit negative. It's the problem. The right-hand side is the aspiration. It's like, this is where we could be. This is how we've partnered with other organizations. This is the art of the possible. This is the promised land. Together, we can get to the promised land. And your job as an organization, I'll come back to this in the customer side, your job as an organization is to move your customers from the left to the right. By the way, this is a slide I absolutely show customers. It's absolutely an external slide because I want to understand where they are, and I want to be incredibly curious and understand in these pieces what this all means to them. I've only got 2 slides on purpose. Those are my 2 slides. Any questions, observations on purpose?
Well, I have one question. You mentioned framework. Is this this is the table, of course. Is there more internal behind it, or is the table the framework you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a good question, Joran. So what I've found is, and I've guided a bunch of companies through this, and that fundamentally I kind of showed them the framework, take a bit of a stab at the first elements of what it might be, and then fundamentally get the senior exec team to work on it. And typically it needs 2 or 3 iterations to go around before it's kind of, complete and consistent and meaningful and passes the so what test. And so it takes 2 or 3 iterations. And then when it's done, the challenge is then how do you communicate and get everybody to understand it and use it across the business? And that's not easy to do, but fun. And I remember I've seen Salesforce. I've seen it's the power of it is when it's on one page. But yeah, and there's typically a bunch of other work behind it.
Yeah,
does that answer the question?
100%. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, or I'm going to move on to focus? No. So yeah, doctors are smart. The other piece on focus, I fundamentally believe in quality, not quantity. I've always believed in that. I really believe in doing a small number of things well, and not a larger number of things okay. And in my experience, that's what market-leading organizations do, and they think really, really carefully about what they do, and actually they say no to a lot of things. And in fact, when I took over Fairsail, it only had 13 people, but it had 2 solutions, and I closed one of them down on the basis that the company was never going to get 2 things right. It's hard enough to get 1 thing right. So I'm more of a believer of the Henry Ford model, which is you can have all your eggs in one basket, just watch the basket. Good Henry Ford quote. He knew a lot about B2B SaaS, it turns out. Anyway, so focus. So what does focus mean? And I kind of picked out some go-to-market examples here, although this actually applies across the business. But because one of the areas that typically organizations really think about is, how do I go from being relatively small to being relatively big? And this also gets into the whole kind of SDR, BDR model that organizations are building. And so the way I think about this, and actually I lean on a lot of the professional services experience I have, is that actually breaking to a market, I kind of follow the management consultant model rather than the B2B model, which is just, call lots of people. And that means really thinking about a focus list of organizations that are relevant, that literally can be on one page, like 40 to 100 companies. And then actually having a conversation with them about something to do with them. So I'll give an example. I was with the CEO of an HR tech business I'm an angel in earlier in the week, and I was talking to her about that. And they were fundamentally kind of calling companies about their solution. And I said, well, my advice is not to do that. My advice is to, because they're in the whole kind of conversations area and conversations and performance management. So my advice is to call those companies and say, we're doing a thought piece on conversations for performance. Would you like to be part of that thought piece? We want to understand what you're doing with the conversations in your company. From that, we will actually build a little thought piece. We will figure out the kind of the why and the what and kind of what's going wrong and what's happening in your organization, what you want to do. We'll create a nice little piece of thought leadership. We'll invite you to an event, etc., etc. That is the way we'll have a conversation. In my experience, that's a way to have a much more senior conversation about something on their minds and not something on your minds. Because when they wake up in the morning, they're not thinking about you. Question is, what are they thinking about that you can help them solve? So that's kind of how I've seen business development. And by the way, the bottom stat is real. That's from Fairsail. We did an exercise like this that cost £3,000 and generated £2 million of business. And for those who measure a return on marketing investment, I think that's a pretty good return. So the next one is, and again, you know, I'm a big believer in kind of ARR, because ARR is your ultimate measure of can you win the trust of new customers. Yes, leads, opportunities, they have some relevance, but fundamentally, unless they're turning into real customers, that's what butters the parsnips, as they say in the UK. And so it's about that kind of productivity. And the third point here is really important. I think even at early stage, you've got to be able to say no, and you've got to be prepared to say no. And if you never say no, you're never going to build a serious business. You've got to know what you're going to say no to and why. Don't lie, as Taylor Swift would say, like ever. I've never lied in my professional career. I may not have told the whole truth on every occasion, but I've never lied. And I don't think anybody ever should. And then interviewing people. As a CEO, I interviewed everybody who joined the business up until it had 150 people. And it was at the last stage, and I might only spend half an hour with them, but I interviewed everybody. And I highly recommend that as a strategy for people. It was actually made my life easier as well, because then I knew everybody. I'm going to zoom through this. There's lots to get through. The other one is, you know, be really, really clear on play where you can win, say no when you can't. So again, when I talk to companies and they say, well, we're going to do enterprise and mid-market and SME, I just don't believe it. I just think you have to pick one market and do it well. And when you start to have a kind of volume and you think about who are your A versus B opportunities, my advice is to focus everything on the A's and B's and just don't even talk to the C's and D's. And obviously you kind of get this as over time. The thing on multiple customer contacts, in the low growth environment that we're in, my experience is that more people will be involved in the decision at the customer. So you're going to manage all of those different stakeholders. Don't rely on it just being your business sponsor. It probably won't be. It will go to the CFO. It will go to legal. It will go to IT. So anticipate that and get ahead of it. I'll zoom through these. And then, SDR and BDR, incredibly important, but we are in the world of kind of peak SDR. Everybody's getting flooded by things. And so you just need to be really thoughtful about what you're doing. Sometimes the implications of an unsuccessful call can be much greater than not getting an opportunity. You can leave an impression of your company that may last forever. And so you just have to be really careful. And in my view, I'd much rather have a smaller number of conversations and outreach by SDR and BDR, but every single one be high quality. Always much rather do that. That's that. The other piece on focus is partnership. I'm firmly of the belief that no business succeeds alone. This is a framework I've seen used for partners in many different situations, but it's about thinking about it as a kind of overlapping Venn diagram, and the partners that help you on go-to-market, i.e. they create new opportunities, the partners that help you broaden your solution, and the partners that help you implement. And there may be crossover with that. But I find this is a really helpful way to think about your partnerships, because it demonstrates you may be kind of overweight in one area and underweight in another. And these partners need to be managed really differently according to what kind of partner they are. So I found this is a helpful chart. And then the last one on focus is, this is something I learned at Accenture a long time ago. If there's time to fix it when it goes wrong, which, by the way, spoiler alert, there always is, that means there's time to do it right the first time. There is no excuse for things that are avoidable going wrong the first time. Just people say, oh, well, we had to do it on Friday. No, you didn't. You had to do it right. And in my experience, if when you explain to a customer or a partner, look, I know we said Friday, but it's not going to be right on Friday. We need to do it next week for these reasons. They are almost always completely understanding and flexible. They would much rather you did it right than did it wrong and had to fix it later. And so this mentality of quality first, and by the way, this goes across every single function in the business, go to market, customer, operations, development, engineering, everything. And this is a great mentality to have. And that helps to be more productive and effective. And I'm kind of rattling through these, but that was focus. Any observations, questions on focus?
Yes, Simon.
Yeah. My question is, so I love what you say at the beginning. To be a market leader, you have to do all these things, and then you've got the other side of it, which is you've got to do a few things well. So how would you sort of focus on? Yeah, how would you think about the two of those? You've got to make progress.
So
on
really good questions. So,
yeah.
So my favorite case study for this is Salesforce.
Right.
And the reason I'm a favorite case study is look at Salesforce now, right? They do sales, they do marketing, they do platform, they do community, they do all kinds of different things. They do SME, they do mid-market, they do enterprise, they do everything. Mm-hmm. They're called Salesforce. And the reason that they're called Salesforce is because they started doing Salesforce automation to the tech sector in the States. That's how they got going. So you look at Salesforce and say, oh my God, it's just so broad. They're smart, right? They started off actually really, really narrow. And they said, basically, we're going to kill Siebel in tech companies. And that was a strategy. And that's why, and actually it's interesting about naming. So they're still called Salesforce. That name and brand doesn't seem to hold them back any from doing all of those different things. But it's about, and their whole strategy was, we want to be market leader, but we're going to start off. And in marketing, this is the bowling pin strategy, right? To knock over all time, you've got to knock over pin one first. So we could do pin one, we're going to do it really, really, really well. And so I actually would encourage organizations, like when you think about market leadership, start really narrow, really, really narrow, and become market leader. And then you can always expand from there. But I'd much rather organizations did that than trying to do too much and get spread too thin and just fail. So start now. What can you be leader in the next 12 months? And there will be a way of defining. You can broaden it out in the future. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Now, everybody's got different businesses and different areas. I wouldn't dream about kind of making decisions, but that's the way I think about it.
Yeah.
Okay, So the next one is customers, because if we don't have successful customers, then honestly, what's the point? And this next chart just demonstrates with the company growth rates on the left-hand side, and I assumed 85% GRR, which is not very good, and 100% NRR, which again isn't very good in SaaS terms. But at those metrics, it just demonstrates, even with those, how much of the revenue is coming from existing customers versus new customers. And even with the business that's doubling every year, still half the revenue is coming from existing customers. And if you're not growing as quickly as that, that means that more than half your revenue is coming from existing customers. So sometimes the response to this is, well, that's okay, because we're measuring renewal, right? We know exactly what the renewal rates are, and so we're okay, right? So situation is that all renewal means is you didn't get kicked out. That's all it means. And actually, customers don't want to kick you out because they're creating a problem for themselves. They need to find a new solution. They need to run the procurement process. They need to run the project. They need to do data migration. They need to do training. It's a pain. They can do without it. And so to actually kick you out, that means they're really unhappy. And so just renewing doesn't mean they're happy at all. They may be like this guy, just signing it with gritted teeth. And so real customer success is you're so far over the bar that actually renewal is just a no-brainer. It's just a question of how long and how much. And the next, and there are 12, I'm going to pick out like 3. Framework goes through, fundamentally, what are those 12 steps that allow you to have customer success there, which is just way above renewal. Because honestly, who wants to work for a company that says, yeah, we don't get thrown out by our customers? Yeah, great. That sounds like Oracle, right? Don't minute. Oh God, we're recording, aren't we? Anyway, so nobody wants to be there. So the question is kind of, what are those steps that allow you just to be so far above that you're really making customers happy? So the first one, you recognize the picture, is fundamentally, are you taking your customers from the left to the right? Do they understand that? Can they genuinely see that you are achieving with them the promised land that you set out when you first talk to them? And again, what this means is that you're integrating and you're aligning all of the conversations that you're having for the customer. And that kind of mutual promise that you have, you're actually delivering on it, because customers that they know you're moving to the right, they won't churn. They won't churn. And more than that, they will be advocates for you in all kinds of different ways. So fundamentally, if you can move your customers to the right, you're in good shape. I'm not going to do all of these. You'll have the deck, so you can go through it at your leisure. Next one is the whole, in the SaaS world, what about services? I was in a board meeting last year, and the CEO said, well, actually, yeah, we're going to stop doing services because we're a software business. It's all about ARR. It's all about multiples. And so therefore, we're going to stop doing services. We're just going to have ARR. And my response was, why would you plan customer disappointment? He said, I didn't say that. I said, well, how many customers have you ever had that have become successful without your services? None. So, okay. So if you remove services, you are guaranteeing customer disappointment and planning that in. What kind of a plan is that? And actually, there's nothing anti-services about SaaS. Look at Workday, look at Salesforce. They've all got like 10, 15% services revenue, and that's okay. Because services revenue is there to get customers from where they start on the left-hand side of the bridge to the right-hand side to be successful. And that's what they need. Now, obviously, our job is to productize that as much as possible, is to make it effective, is to use partnerships where important. But by the way, if you are using partners, you have to supervise them incredibly carefully. Because if a partner implementation goes wrong, guess what? It won't be their fault, it'll be your fault, and you'll have to pick up the pieces. So they need quality assurance on them and expert services and all kinds of things. But actually services are incredibly important. Now, less so in SME, but I'm much more talking about kind of mid-market and enterprise, less so SME, but in mid-market and enterprise, absolutely. Because fundamentally, you've done the journey like 100 times or 1,000 times. They've done it, not at all. So there's nothing wrong with you helping them along that journey. And in fact, that's what you should do. So first thing on services, but this is an ex-chief customer officer I work with. He had this great analogy. He said, look, so a project around SaaS should operate like a jumbo jet pilot. Should be all about flicking switches. So fundamentally configuration, not customization. And those two words are sometimes used interchangeably. They are fundamentally different. And the difference is that customize is a code change, and you don't want code changes in your services projects. They should be all configuration. But you can crash a plane by flicking the wrong switches, right? It takes real skill to fly a plane. Again, turns out pilots are smart. So, but it should be kind of clicks, not code. And again, don't forget partners, because whatever you do, they need to be able to do just as well. So those two there. What else was going to highlight? I was also just going to highlight. Oh yeah. So the other piece, and as you scan, in fact, when I was running Fairsail, appointed a chief customer officer when the business had 19 people. Every single business I chair has got a chief customer officer reporting to the CEO, responsible for these 4 things. This has become the kind of best practice model in SaaS globally. I'm not going to go through any more of these. So that's that. Innovation. Just want to do 2 things on innovation. So the first thing on innovation is that it must link directly to that purpose. Again, you'll see that the purpose is like the writing on the stick of rock that goes through the organization, and it's got to have that direct link in the same way that every single piece is linked to that. And so, for example, in the Orbis board meeting I've come from, and I won't tell you what they are, but we've just now got 2 or 3 strands of innovation which are unbelievably exciting, which are completely aligned across the organization. And you don't have to have a huge number of innovation topics that you're driving in any one year. And in fact, I'd much rather have 1 great one than 5 kind of boring or mediocre ones. These are 2 in 2 other companies I'm involved with. Arctic Shores, which is HR tech, and it's all about scrapping the CV and allowing organizations to hire people based on behavior. And just an incredible piece of innovation and pioneering based on that. Flu company, it's about essentially helping organizations to prevent fraud before it ever happens. Which is the kind of nirvana of every organization and public body. So again, these are really kind of interesting, dynamic, really impactful pieces of innovation that are driven across the whole organization. Last one, don't mean to rush these, but I do want to get these through on time, is team. I put this kind of deliberately last. Team and people are not last, but I put it kind of deliberately last. But simple fact, great companies are made up of great people. These are photos of software companies that I've been, I am or have been directly involved with. I'm a big fan of photos. And in fact, many of these photos I instigated. The top right is in Krakow from about a month ago. But these are incredibly important because they really kind of a moment in time, and this is what people remember, oh yeah, I was there when we did. And so they're really, really important because they've kind of framed that and they become the kind of the linchpin to people's memory. But every single organization succeeds or fails because of its people. And because of how you can attract, manage, develop, retain, excite, and engage all of those people. And it's, I mean, every single one of these means a huge amount to me because of the situation and the context and the team that it was part of. This is an example. These are the Clue offices where I'm this Friday. And again, it's about having that visibility and that understanding across the business. And the top one is really kind of what they do. That this is the top line is the what, and it's their kind of promise and their mutual promised land for their customers. Bottom left is the purpose, which you'll see, which is kind of the narrative of the why and the what, and then their values on the right hand side. And values are important because they're what defines behavior and how people make decisions in organizations. Ownership, I'm a big fan of. I like people to be involved. I like them to be utterly committed to the business. Equity and ownership can really help. And so with the organizations I work with, typically there's pretty broad spread of equity and ownership across the business. When I ran Fairsail, every single person was a shareholder, so everybody made some money when the business was sold, which is great, absolutely great. So and then the other thing is kind of a couple of myths. And people say, well, software, it's all guys, right? So yeah, it's not just men, and this is not just sales. So this is a real photo from Fairsail, which is now Sage People, which is almost half women across the business, including engineering. It's perfectly possible to do that. And again, I like organizations to be diverse in all kinds of ways. So yes, gender, but age, ethnicity, just the way people think, just all kinds of different areas, just to make them different, to force themselves to think differently all the time. I think is incredibly important. And then the chart on the right-hand side illustrates, and this is the real Fairsail story, just how when businesses grow, it's not just sales that grow. And I actually look at a lot of business plans and like product and engineering, customers stay the same and go-to-market grows. It's not life, right? If your ARR doubles, you probably need to double the team across the board. So, you know, my experience, the three big chunks: go-to-market, customer, and product engineering. And the vast majority of people will be in those three. Yes, the finance ops will be the kind of smaller part, but those three are all going to grow as you grow, and don't think they won't, because otherwise you'll end up with a lot of people and costs that you weren't expecting. So everything grows. And that's just looking at the time. Oh my God, 10 past. So I've rattled through those. Happy to take questions on any of those. Just highlight something called Boardwave. Boardwave is something I'm part of. It's a non-profit, and it's a new European community for CEOs and founders of SaaS businesses. So you should all look at it as boardwave.org. It's now up and running across Europe. So Phil Robinson, the founder, is a friend of mine. I think it's a fantastic initiative. Look at that. If you're interested in joining, ping me, and I can make sure you're kind of pre-approved as you go through the process. That's it, Jovi. I think I'm on time. Happy to do questions.
Great timing, Adam. Any questions from anybody? Thank you so much for that. Gustavo.
Great content, Adam. Thank you very much for sharing. Oh, I found it interesting to hear about Salesforce and to think more about our business, because we do a platform, a CRM platform for salespeople in Brazil. And the thing is that many customers are coming to us doing the trial, and when salespeople talk to them, they want features that are more connected to prospection, to the pre-sales and post-sales or marketing, and not only on sales CRM. So we are starting to implement features in that cases. So I think it's like expanding the product market fit, the go-to-market. So we are starting to be not only a CRM, not only a narrow CRM for SME. How do you see how?
Well, what I would encourage you to do, it's a really good question, because what I'd encourage you to do is to think really carefully about what you have to build yourself and what you should integrate and use to, because no solution exists in isolation. You're going to have to integrate to all kinds of things. So for example, at Orbison, we practically always integrate with ServiceNow, because ServiceNow is typically in use across the organization, and it's incredibly important that we have that connector and we have two-way flow of information. What we absolutely did not do is say we want to kind of replace ServiceNow and customers. That would just be stupid. And so we're making constant decisions about what is it we should do and what is it we need to integrate with. So, and I'll give you an example, right? It's because I'd spent a lot of time in the HR tech world. If you're providing an HR tech solution in enterprise, you need to know exactly how you're going to integrate with Workday and SuccessFactors. And if you don't have a really crisp answer to that, in my view, you won't get anywhere, because you need to know what's going to be around you, and you need to make it really simple and straightforward to integrate with it and to have joint success. But my advice, don't try and do too much at once. I would encourage you to kind of start narrower, and you can always expand from there.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any other questions?
I always have a
Jordan?
question. Yeah. On one slide, Adam, you had configured that don't customize. Would you say that also counts for the services part? Like you need to have it as much configured as possible?
That's totally. That slide is really all about services.
Okay.
And the services should be all configuration and zero customization. Because if you have to do a code change fundamentally on a customer project, you're creating a branch, and then you have multiple different solutions, and that's just death. I could name you quite a few SaaS companies that have done that. And so actually they're not really one solution. They've actually got like 8 or 10 different, and some of them are quite big, right? I won't name the company, because they have not been disciplined enough about that. And sometimes it's better to say, no, we're not going to do that. Sometimes it is a good idea, but again, I've got one situation, not here, but another company, where customer wants the company to do something it doesn't do. And we said, okay, that's interesting, but you're going to have to part fund it. And you're going to have to at least part fund that development effort. And by the way, we're going to make it so it can be suitable for all customers, but because you want it and it's not in a planner, you're going to have to fund it.
Nice.
Alex, I can see your hand.
Yeah. So I guess obviously to the earlier point about the market and the recession, is the UK in recession or not? And I also guess about the mini banking crisis that we're seeing with SVB collapsing, which I think impacted a few of the members here and within the wider group. What are you advising to your software companies just around cash management and banking risk mitigation, like who to bank with, how many banks to bank with, that sort of thing? Yeah, just keen to hear.
Really, really good question. In fact, I mean, that was a truly shit weekend, because all 3 companies that I chair bank with SVB UK, all 3 companies. So it was just a horrific weekend. Luckily, I was saying to Jovi earlier, I've actually got somebody pretty senior at SVB UK who I know. And so I was getting information kind of direct, which made things like, because I thought their corporate communication with their customers was pretty pitiful that weekend, actually. And actually, this is true, by the way. One of the companies that has 90% of its money with SVB, the CEO, Robert, and he did put this on LinkedIn, he had an email from his SVB relationship manager on the Monday morning saying, "Hi, Robert, hope you had a good weekend." No, actually, it was a truly shit weekend because of you. Anyway, I'll talk about tone deaf. So one of the interesting dynamics that SVB UK had that I think is now utterly unsustainable is they said fundamentally you need to keep all your deposits with us, particularly if you have venture debt or something else. I think that's now an absurd request for any bank to make. And what I see all organizations doing is just having a kind of diversification of their banking arrangements and just splitting it up and having more money on hand in more different places. And every organization is doing that because I don't, the next time a bank fails may not be a, kind of interest rate instrument, which is what killed SVB. And oh, by the way, great advice from Goldman Sachs to sell all those 18 billion of treasury bonds. Great, thanks, Goldman's really, really good advice. Anyway, it may not be that, but your bank could be hit by a cyber attack or some kind of other black swan. So yeah, I'd see basically kind of fund diversification, deposit diversification across the board.
Cool. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Any other questions? Simon?
Yeah, I just wonder if you have a point of view on how the world of enterprise software changes now that every software is getting easier, and so you've got a lot of product-led growth companies coming through. Do you have a point of view on something around that area?
I think what's really interesting is actually when I look at it, kind of how much of business and process is not digitalized. I think what everybody recognizes now is just the fundamental importance of technology on every industry. And again, if you go talk to boardrooms of a manufacturing company or a bank or a travel, every single chairman, CFO, CEO, they're now all very interested in how tech-enabled their business is and how much that's going to drive their future. And that's different even to 5 years ago. So I think now we're kind of past that point of, and you remember we used to have these things called chief digital officers 10 years ago. I mean, that seems like a joke now. Yeah. It's always like, oh, well, I can just pass for digital in that bit and not have to worry about it. Well, good luck with that now. Because fundamentally, every organization, if they don't have a digital future, they don't have a future. Like every company in every sector, you don't have a digital future, you don't have a future. And so we're past that point of debate. But what's interesting is just how much is yet to go. So there are still organizations that manage their people on a spreadsheet. Yeah. Even now in 2023, organizations have no clue what their processes are. They've no clue what applications they use. And so actually, I'm just back to the beginning, to Jovi's point, I'm still hugely optimistic. I think we've got way further to go with software than we've been. But there's no debate that that's gonna happen now. That's my view.
Brilliant.
Which means, honestly, kudos to all of you, but you all made an incredibly good choice. I don't think this industry is going to run out of legs for a long, long, long time.
Amazing. I suppose that's a great way to end this workshop. Kudos to everybody that's here. Again, thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today. And again, thank you for everyone who joined us today. So a quick summary on Adam's 5-element framework, just to kind of remind us all. So it's find your purpose, create focus, understand real customer success for what it is for your customers, continue to innovate, and lastly, celebrate every moment with your team. I would also recommend everyone linking with Adam on LinkedIn, but also watching his videos on Success in Recession. They were 1 to 2 minutes each. There's about 6 of them, and they're really, really good and really, really good takeaways from that one as well. So I hope everybody, got as much takeaways from today as I did. And if you did, please feel free to share with the world in our circle, in WhatsApp, in LinkedIn, over dinner tonight, wherever you want to share it, share with the world and tell them that they missed out on today's workshop as well. But before anyone clicks the end call, I just have a quick reminder, from our usual SFM membership. Next week, same time, same place, we are back and we are hosting our quarterly Connect. And we have had a few suggestions as well. So in tandem with our quarterly connect, we are hosting our first ever product review session with our lovely Simon. Simon and the Blocks team recently released their beta product, and so is using for some usability review and feedback before they release paid plans later this year. So make sure to RSVP for that. Also, we are 7 weeks away from our annual SFM retreat in the lovely Mykonos. So if you are like myself and you're missing sunshine, warmth, and heat, don't forget to purchase your tickets for that. We have a fantastic agenda that will be announced shortly. We also have an amazing group of mentors that you can just hang out in Mykonos with. So we have Emmerich Arnold from Agora Pulse, Phil Chambers from Pecan, Bridget Harris from You Can Book Me, and Krish Submaranian from ChargeBee. So you can just hang out with them in Mykonos. So why not? So don't forget and get your tickets for that. We'll love to see you all. And on the topic of the Mykonos retreat, don't forget to send through your nominations on which SFMer you feel will benefit from going to the retreat, as we'd like to gift a ticket for this year. So there's been some great nominations so far, but we'd love to see who else you think would be deserving of this. We are closing that poll on Friday, so make sure to send through. And lastly, just a quick announcement from me. There's some updates and announcements in regards to Circle and your founders circles next week. So do keep an eye out on that. But I'm done. Thank you everybody for coming today. Really enjoyed having Adam, really enjoyed the questions, and it's been a great Wednesday evening for everybody. So have a good rest of the week, and we will see you back here next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.